So yeah, we have our next speaker. We have Ellen. Hi, Ellen. Ellen Williams. You are Chief Development Officer at Exum Instruments, and your presentation is the value of storytelling. AM won't start itself. Sell itself. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
My bad.
yeah, no worries. Can you hear me okay and see my screen okay? I'll take that as a yes. All right. Well, thank you all so much for this opportunity. I'm thrilled to be here. I attended this conference last year, and so just really glad to be a part of it and speaking here on the people track this time. So this topic of technical storytelling is very near and dear to my heart, which I'll explain in a little bit more detail. But yeah, as Eliana mentioned, I'm Ellen Williams. I'm the Chief Development Officer at Exum Instruments, and I'll tell a little bit more about what Exum is doing and how we fit into the 3D printing landscape as well. So, as I mentioned, this is a topic that's very personal to me because for those who don't know me and aren't connected with me on LinkedIn, if you go to connect with me, you'll see that my LinkedIn headline is Technical Storyteller. This is my personal brand. And so I'll talk about how I came up with that brand and really what it means to me and why I think it's so valuable in technical industries, especially for the additive manufacturing industry. And of course, this wouldn't be a presentation about storytelling if I didn't tell a story. So I'll talk about a lesson that I learned in college, which again just reiterates why this technical storytelling concept is so important, yet often so lacking in these technical industries. And then I'm going to introduce one of my favorite frameworks for bringing storytelling into your technical work. And I hope that that gives you something to walk away with and hopefully apply to your own work. And I certainly want to leave some time for questions. So feel free to, I think, put those in the Q&A, put general comments in the chat is probably the way to go about this. And yeah, looking forward to talking to you about this. So I have a technical background, studied engineering, and throughout my early career held a lot of engineering roles in the oil and gas industry. So you can see me on the left there with my hard hat and steel-toed boots. That was my first job out of college as a field engineer. And throughout all of these technical roles in my early career, I was always asked to be the one who was client facing or presenting the results. So that top picture, you can see me giving a presentation at a conference. And not only was this something that my colleagues wanted me to do, but it was something that I genuinely enjoyed as well. I realized that I didn't just want to be the engineer who sat behind the computer, who did the modeling. I wanted to understand what sort of business decisions that modeling or that technical work drove. And so that inspired me to get a business degree and kind of start to get into some technical sales roles and ultimately business development. And so it was during this time that I realized how common the term storytelling was in business. You'll see articles in the Harvard Business Review about storytelling in terms of driving and influencing people and influencing decisions. You'll even see courses in business schools about storytelling and influencing. And so it's common that storytelling is a powerful, effective tool in business, but in these highly technical industries like the oil and gas industry where I came from and in the 3D printing industry, there's another piece, right? Like we can't just be good storytellers. We also have to be good technical translators. We have to be able to take this highly complex, highly technical concept or product and distill it into that good story that then drives those decisions. So it was here that I realized that, I could have this technical brand, or I could have this personal brand as a technical storyteller and use it as a way to convey my value that, yes, I did spend a lot of time in the oil and gas industry, but I could adopt this brand to any other industry and any other technical product or technical concept. So It was here back in, the spring of 2020 when I didn't have a job and knew that I wasn't going to be able to find one in oil and gas, because as you all probably remember, the oil and gas industry tanked about then and allowed me to transition into Exum. And so what Exum is doing is we've developed a new scientific instrument for measuring the chemistry of solid materials. And technically it's a mass spectrometer. I don't have any chemistry experience, but this I've used my expertise in terms of technical storytelling in order to add value to telling the story about why Exum's instrument is valuable for our customers. And you might be wondering what we're doing here, and it's because we have chosen additive manufacturing as our first target market. So anywhere from verifying the chemistry of feedstock powders to chemically diagnosing part failures to new alloy development, a lot of different applications for the additive manufacturing industry. And so I'm thrilled to be a part of this industry. The final picture there, you can see me at my first A-Mug. And fun fact, I was 5 months pregnant at the time, so unfortunately I didn't get to enjoy any of the open bars, but definitely enjoyed a lot of the buffets and all of the copious snacks that they offer you at A-Mug. So I know that this is kind of a long intro, and the reason why I wanted to spend a little bit of time on that is because I don't think that my story is unique here. I bet there are a lot of you out there that have made transitions from other careers, that have found ways to develop your own personal brand and bring your own value from your other industries into 3D printing. And we need to continue to encourage people from other industries into this one because it's going to keep growing, right? And so we could probably spend a whole another session on personal branding, but just wanted to take that moment here to just say that, telling a good story about your own value is also an important takeaway from this as well. That, don't just think because you're new to this industry that you have to start from the ground level or start from zero. There's still a lot of value that you can bring from your previous careers, your previous experience in other industries. So with that, I'll talk about the experience that I've had of why storytelling is so valuable for technical products, technical projects, just any sort of technical work in these highly technical industries. So as I mentioned, this is a lesson that I learned back in college, and it's something that I continue to reflect on because it's just something that I keep thinking about in my career. So when I was in college, I participated in an Engineers Without Borders project. Some of you may be familiar with Engineers Without Borders. For those who aren't, it's maybe you've heard of Doctors Without Borders. But essentially, we go to developing countries and develop engineering projects. So my team was going down to Huamansanya, Peru, which is a small town in the foothills of the Andes Mountains on the western side of the country. And we were going to build more effective biomass stoves or cooking stoves. Some of you may be familiar that across a lot of the developing world, they are still cooking on open fires. And so in this Peruvian village, there is just open trench fires in their kitchens. And so you can imagine anytime you go into the kitchen where the women, because it was usually women cooking, your eyes just immediately fill with tears from all of that smoke. And you can imagine how harmful that is to breathe that in for the 3 meals a day that you're cooking. And then not to mention, anytime you're not cooking, then you're having to walk around and make sure you gather enough wood for all of those fires. So clearly there's an opportunity to bring more effective stoves to not only help with the health of not breathing in that smoke, but also the environmental impact of burning so much wood. So like good engineers, we studied what biomass stove projects had gone on in other countries. We learned about effective combustion chamber designs. We did our homework so that when in the summer, when we went down to Huamansanya, then we were able to hit the ground running, figure out what locally available tools and materials there were to build a prototype, and then start implementing them into the villagers' homes. So you can see us on the left there, we've got a bunch of chalk drawings on the wall. That was our prototype. And then on the right, you can see one of our friends actually building one of these in one of the villagers' homes. And now you can see that, we've got that metal chimney that's going to take the smoke out of the kitchen so that you're not breathing that in. Once he's finished with what he's doing in there, then a metal plate will go over the top of the stove to effectively distribute that heat. And then that little white box on the front there, that's the combustion chamber that we focus so much of our attention on, so that when you made a fire, then you could get very effective burning and very effective heat transfer without using as much wood. So we built at least 10 of these in different villagers' homes. We had a great design, had a great prototype, but did we really succeed? And so I'll tell you that the first stove that we built, we were so excited to be there for the first meal cooked on it. And I mean, we had, our notebooks, we had one of those little guns that would read the temperature on the top of the stove, and we're pointing out, look how the smoke isn't in the room, isn't this wonderful? And all Doña Elena could say was, this is taking longer to boil water than it normally does. And so, and some of the other comments that we got were, this isn't how my mother used to cook. So we thought that our benefits of this new stove would be so obvious, but they just weren't. We failed to realize that we would have to convey the value of this stove because it was something new, it was something different, and it was going to make the process take a little bit longer. And so the fact that there was no smoke in the room was just did not even cross her mind, because all she cared about was, I've got to get breakfast on the table sooner. And so I'll pause here and just ask, how many of you have experienced this in your career? How many times have you heard someone get so excited about their model or their design and fail to convey who might actually benefit from it? I know we talk about this a lot in additive manufacturing, of just because you can design it, just because you can print it, doesn't mean that we should. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be the right part to bring into production for a lot of other reasons. And so this is why telling a good story and conveying the value is so important in highly technical industries. And so with that, I'll transition to this framework that I really like. So this is not mine. I didn't make this up. This is based on a book by Donald Miller called Building a Story Brand. And I encourage you, if you want, check out the book. You can also just go to mystorybrand.com and you can actually fill out your brand, your work just on an online format. But I want to point out here that the book talks a lot about brands, it talks a lot about products, but this framework can be applied to anything that we do. So, if you're there and you're saying, I'm not in sales, I'm not selling anything, this is still a framework that you can use for your technical work. I mean, everyone is in sales in some way. You have to convey the value of your work to your boss, for example, or maybe to someone else on your team. So the framework here is just that all of our favorite stories, our favorite movies, our favorite books, they all have the same components. And these components can be applied to our work as well. So let's think about it. All stories have to start with a main character or a hero, right? And so we understand who they are, what they do, what they want, what their dreams, their goals are. But of course, it wouldn't be an interesting story if they didn't have a problem. So we often think in movies about a villain, maybe Darth Vader in Star Wars, but in business, maybe that villain is actually something intangible that's villainized. So for example, wasting material could be a villain that additive manufacturing could battle. And so there are these there are external problems, there are also internal problems. So maybe the fear of adopting something new could be an internal problem. And ultimately, philosophical problems as well. So then this character meets a guide. We can think of Yoda for Luke Skywalker. And that guide first expresses empathy. They understand that character, what they're going through, what their problems are, but they also show their authority. They show that they have the expertise and they can be trusted so that they can then give a plan. And this can either be a process, so kind of a step-by-step plan, or it could be just an agreement, just an understanding that, you can trust me to guide you through this ending. And the exciting part is that call to action. And this can either be direct or transitional. So something that, again, involves a few more steps. And then, of course, we all love stories that end in a happy ending, right? So it has to end in a success and allow that character to avoid failure. And both of these things are important because for some people, that failure actually resonates stronger and is more impactful than the success. So it's good to think about both of those things that you're doing, not only how you're helping your character succeed, but also avoid failure. And then if we want to just distill this into a short elevator pitch, we can just talk about that character transformation, how they went from something to something else. And now I'll pause here because the biggest takeaway from this framework is that your product, your project, your work, you are not the hero. You are not the main character. You are the guide. And that was something that we missed in our Engineers Without Borders project. We thought, we're the engineers, we've done all this work, we've got this great idea, this great design, we're going to save the day. When really we should have been thinking about the villagers as the main characters and us simply as the guides. And then we would have been able to more effectively convey the value of what we were working on. So I'll just give a quick example from Exum. So as I mentioned, we're developing a mass spectrometer. In fact, it's a laser ablation, laser ionization, time of flight mass spectrometer. That's a mouthful, and it's highly complicated and took a lot of analytical scientists many years and mechanical engineers to develop this instrument. So I don't lead with that. The brand name is the Mass Box because it is all contained in a box with a touchscreen interface on the front so that it's an intuitive, approachable instrument that looks more like an app on your smartphone than a traditional mass spectrometer. So rather than talk about all the complexities of it or to talk about how hard our team worked on developing this innovative concept, instead we tell a story. We talk about the materials scientist in additive manufacturing who needs to check the chemistry of their feedstock powder. But the problem is that it typically takes 3 analytical instruments that are difficult to use in order to get that full periodic table of what they need to analyze. And so they don't necessarily want to bring all those instruments in-house, and they don't want to learn how to use them or maybe hire a chemist in order to operate them. So instead, they may send their samples out to an external lab and wait for weeks to get results, pay thousands of dollars for their samples. And philosophically, there's this problem that traditional analytical instruments are hard to use and demand that expertise in order to use them. But then that material scientist meets Exum, and we can express empathy because we've got a team full of people who have used all of the analytical instruments that you can find in labs. We understand how difficult they are. And then we also express authority. We say, hey, yeah, check out these results that we're getting with the mass box. See how they're comparable to traditional mass spectrometers. And then let's talk about a plan. So our process plan goes from, let's have a meeting, let's learn about your materials. If it sounds like a good fit, then come out to Denver and touch our instrument, see how it works, and get to run some of your materials and just move through the touchscreen interface and see how intuitive it is. And so if you go to our website, you'll see calls to action. So direct calls to action, meaning book a demo, contact us. But then also those transitional calls to action, like download our white paper, follow us on LinkedIn, sign up for our newsletter so that you can stay in touch and see how we're working with the additive manufacturing industry. But the ending is that material scientist has the MassBox in-house that's able to give them the chemistry of their powder in just a matter of minutes, rather than waiting weeks and paying thousands of dollars to that external lab to get those results. And of course, that can help avoid failure. If they know that that their powder is in spec right at the moment, they avoid potentially printing something that maybe has too much oxygen and could potentially have the properties that they didn't want. And so our character transformation here is from a material scientist who's dependent upon an external lab for chemistry data to an empowered mass spec user with the MassBox. So that's Exum's example of our story and how we fit into the additive manufacturing industry. If that interests you, I encourage you to stop by our table at floor 5, I believe table 10. But with that, I would love to open it up to questions about, ask me about maybe how to apply stories to your work, or I'm also open to the personal branding questions. So would love to hear what sort of questions you all have. And thanks again for attending.
Well, thanks so much, Ellen. That was really interesting, and we do have some Q&A for you, and we've got quite a few minutes. So, maybe as we talk, we might get a few more questions. But the first one is from the lesson that you learned in Peru. Do you speak to the customer or end user before creating your story?
Yeah, I mean, if you can, absolutely, right? Because, take a look at that first bullet point there. In order to know your main character, you have to really know who they are, what they want, what their problem is. So if you aren't able to talk to them, then maybe doing some research on other customers like them, or maybe following them on social media, or checking out their website and just kind of understanding what sort of problems they might have. But yes, absolutely, you would want to talk to your customer before developing your story so that you really understand them and what they want.
And I like the idea of villains. I think we've all met villains in our time. I love the Darth Vader analogy. So another question is, many organizations are afraid to share their know-how because they don't want to educate the competitors. So what are the key arguments you're using to nudge them into understanding the value of sharing know-how?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And I guess, I would say that you don't necessarily have to give too much away in order to tell a good story. As I mentioned, just again, focusing on how someone can benefit from what you're working on, not necessarily the details of the proprietary pieces or those detailed know-how. Just kind of focusing um, on on how someone can actually benefit from it, and just kind of sticking to that high level maybe would keep someone, or make someone be open to sharing what it is they're working on. I hope that answered the question. If not, then feel free to pop something back in there and clarify that.
Yeah, I think that person can also just direct message you if you're still around, Remo, later. So we got two questions from Jamie McKinney. I think we'll combine them so that we can get one answer. Jamie apparently is a huge fan of yours. Hi, Ellen. What advice do you have
Yeah,
for
hi, Jamie.
delivering a data/technical story that doesn't end with success? For example, you're the director of finance and you need to communicate to the CFO that the company didn't meet projections. I love the mindset of being a guide, not a character yourself. So I don't really know if that was a question or a statement, but yeah, what did you think of advice for delivering something that isn't quite like a great ending? How do you do that? Quite a hard question, actually.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, and I guess, I kind of did that in this story, right? Talking about our Engineers Without Borders project that didn't really end in a success. And so, it's very important for us to share those stories too, right? Like there's, especially in highly technical industries, there's too few peer-reviewed publications about a project or a material or a build that didn't work, right? So we need to share these failures because that's how we're going to learn from them. So I think that's a great point, that it's very important to share things that don't end in a success. And the way that I would maybe suggest doing that, so that it doesn't just sound like a buzzkill, is to talk about how it could end in a success. This is what happened, this is what we did, but here's how we could potentially change this story and rewrite another one, or have another hero and actually get that to end in a success and avoid the failure that we went through.
Right, there's another question. We've got lots of questions today, Ellen. Can you speak on finding volunteers to help with these kinds of projects, drumming up excitement within your community to solve local problems?
Yeah, so I mean, I would again take the same approach of just, who am I talking to? What volunteers am I looking for? Who are those types of people? And how can I tell a good story about what I'm working on that would excite them and make them see themselves as the hero, as if I get involved in this project, then I'm going to feel fulfilled. I'm going to put something on my resume for college, whatever it is that that person cares about, that you're trying to recruit as a volunteer. I would just, again, stick them into this framework and figure out how they would like to see themselves succeeding in that story.
Wow, we have a lot of questions for you today, Ellen. It looks like I've actually lost one, so I'm sorry about that. If you haven't heard your question asked, or you can always message Ellen or try and reach her in the networking sessions if you're still around later. But here's one. Can you give an example of what your research consists of when trying to find out what problems customers may have?
Yeah, so I think that definitely goes back to kind of the first question that we talked about, of just, if you're able to talk to a customer, a potential customer, that's the most effective way. If you're able to actually ask them, hey, how do you, what is your workflow like? What are your pain points? That's certainly most effective way. And then, if you aren't able to do that, then being able to do some research on that type of customer, talk to people like them, talk to consultants or people that have a lot of experience in the industry, talk to people. If you're focused on customers in the additive manufacturing industry, go to a Women in 3D Printing event and network, and just talk to people who have been around and understand where things might potentially fit in.
In
And
the
my company is Exum Instruments, Exum, EXUM. And I can drop our website in the chat too.
Yeah, it looks like someone's also asking for the link for the mass box. So I think Ellen can do that after her Q&A is also completed as well. Yes, the company is called Exum. So I think with that, we'll let Ellen take a break, but don't forget, you can also contact her during the rest of the conference. We have some networking sessions coming on. We actually have a break coming off after this next panel. So any of our speakers from today, including Harley and then the future speakers, we're going to have opportunities for you to interact with them. That looks cool.